William, hopefully your favorite videographer from Two Hats Publishing. I welcome you to another Two Hats special of community events. Let's look in and see what's really happening.
Okay. Welcome everyone to the School of Metaphysics here in Dallas. I'm Jamie Metzenberg. I'm the director of this school. And tonight we have a wonderful event planned for you. We will be hearing from Dr. Pamela Blosser, who is a metaphysician, a teacher, a counselor, a minister, and just a wonderful person. She has studied and practiced metaphysics and interfaith studies for over 40 years, and so she has much to give us tonight. And the title of the presentation that she will be giving is Conflict for Transformation, and we are excited to receive you, Dr. Pam, so welcome.
Yeah, even that little YouTube that I watched earlier today, and Ilya, who I'm going to talk about in a little while more about what he has found, he was talking about crisis and or chaos, and he said everybody thinks chaos is something bad, but it's a special kind of order, and I didn't get to listen long enough to find out exactly what his thoughts were about what chaos is, but he's got some very interesting findings. So let's back up a little bit, and we're going to be talking about crisis to transformation. So we're going to start out with the crisis. I think all of you are aware of what's going on in our world. Just kind of like the upheaval that's happening everywhere. The other day, I just went on and just picked up a few headlines of things that are happening in the world. And then I went into my Yahoo and I took some of those subject lines and how charged those subject lines were. So you probably have experienced those yourself, but I'm going to read these. This was like 2 or 3 days ago. Donald Trump reminds Puerto Rico of its billions of dollars of Wall Street debt as satellite image of highlights humanitarian crisis. Puerto Rico faces apocalyptic conditions. Humanitarian crisis grows 3.4 million U.S. citizens. I'll say that again. Humanitarian crisis grows for 3.4 million U.S. citizens. Chinese herb shockingly drops high blood pressure. Millions fewer could have coverage under GOP. Osteen's car makes a Bugatti look like a go-kart. Trump White House's colossal blind spot on private emails. Megyn Kelly awkwardly begins today. Trump blasts criticism of First Lady's high heels. So those were the subject lines in the news. Charged, and some of them, yes, were stating the news. This is what's going on in our world, especially like what was happening in Puerto Rico. But a lot of times there's charged words there. So then I go onto my Yahoo account, and the subject lines are things like, this is a ripoff, we're running out of time, Donald Trump imploding, Trump's latest hire is the worst yet, with capital worst, the bigot wants to ban homosexuality, this bigot wants to ban homosexuality, Trump's drilling assault on the Arctic refuge, bad news, terrible, all in caps. Trump could ruin everything. What's happening in Michigan is disgusting. So you got these loaded, not only are there things happening in the world that, yes, we need to be concerned about, they're getting highlighted with these words that charge and cause you to be angry or fearful. Most of us get angry or fearful about what's happening in the world. And then when we hear these words, we're charged even more. But there are things going on that we rightfully need to be concerned with. I mean, all the natural disasters that have occurred in the last, month? Amazing, the things that have occurred, where there's need everywhere. There's so much need for people. And then politically, we've got the healthcare keeps coming up in the news. North Korea and the threat there with between our countries, the fear of terrorism, and white supremacy has kind of raised its head again. It's been pretty quiet, but now all of a sudden it's back up there and it's in our faces. And things that we rightfully need to be concerned about and could be very afraid about or charged about. And so there is crisis. There is need for us to be concerned. However, if we get distracted by it, if we get angry, if we get fearful, then really we're still part of the problem instead of part of the solution. So I want to take us from there to where we're headed, why it's happening right now, what's going on an evolutionary stand, and what we can do about it. So there's a lot of fear of loss of personal property, loss of income, loss of health care, loss of, where people are being deported or afraid that they might be deported. There's just a lot of fear of loss. And I think we're becoming more and more aware of our fragile world with global warming and then just things that are going on the planet with extinction of certain species and so on and so forth. So we are becoming aware, very much aware, more and more aware, which is actually a good thing. It's a good thing. I'll talk about that later in just a little while. And we're becoming aware of, I believe that we're in the throes of our death, not physical death. Death of old paradigms, death of the way that we used to think. A paradigm is a belief that is commonly agreed upon, that everybody agrees on, that we treat as reality. That's a paradigm. And often we come to find out that those paradigms aren't necessarily true. Like at one point, everybody thought the world was flat. I guess some people still do, still think the world is flat. And you can probably think of paradigms that you grew up with that you later found out were not the case. Everybody agreed that something, and then it wasn't necessarily the case. So there have been ideas of the end of the world coming. 2012 was supposed to be the end of the world, according to the Mayan calendar. And then people said, well, it's not really the end of the world, but the end of the world as we know it, which I think that was a true statement. But people didn't go very deep with that. They just said, well, it's just the end of the world as we know it. And then they just went on their way and didn't think too much about what that really meant. And then we have the very conservative Christians who believe that the end of the world is near and the rapture is going to come and some will be taken and some will be left behind. So there's that going on. So there is this thought of the end of the world. And it really is the end of the world as we have been living it, and the end of the world as we have known ourselves as human beings. Another thing that's happening right now is Pluto, and astrologically, Pluto entered Capricorn in 2008, and it's going to stay there until 2024. Pluto is it's very slow moving, so it's a generational planet. It changes things on a generational basis. Capricorn has to do with huge change, large change. And especially from an article by Molly Hall, she said that Capricorn is an ally to reform what's toxic and not authentic. And I think we're seeing that more and more. The pretense, the lies that we're being told, we're being more and more distrustful of what's being told, and fake news and all this kind of stuff that's coming up now. So it is a huge planetary change that's going on. Now I'm going to talk about that gentleman that I talked about a little while ago, Ilya Prigogine. He's a Belgian chemist, and he received a Nobel Prize for his work. And his work was in the laws of thermodynamics. The laws of thermodynamics state that when pressure is put on a system, the system begins to break down. But he discovered that there were certain systems that was not the case at all. That when pressure was put on a system, it didn't begin to break down. It actually rose to a new level and stayed at that new level. The first time I heard about this man and his work, my thought was, this man has discovered on a kind of physical realm, in a scientific realm, evolution. Because I think probably if we were to go back and look at the natural evolution of the species, of different species, things probably did evolve when there's some kind of pressure put on, whether it was our environmental or something else that was put on that species, and then it mutated to something else. I don't know about when the human came on the scene, what kind of pressure was put there that brought our species, but I think that's probably true. So this is a quote from him. He said, "A system in balance and functioning well is difficult to change. But as a system falls into disorder, change becomes more and more feasible and finally inevitable. At that inevitable point, the least bit of coherent order," I repeat, the least bit of coherent order can bring in order the whole disorderly array. The least bit of coherent order. Which direction the change takes depends on the nature of the chaotic attractor that lifts the chaos into its new order. If that chaotic attractor is demonic, the old cycle simply repeats itself, which seems to have been historically the case for our species. But if the chaotic attractor were benevolent or divine, the new order would be of that same nature. The new order would be of that same nature. Which tells me how important it is for all of us to think highly, to think high thoughts. I'm not saying to walk around denying the chaos that's there, denying the concerns, pretending they don't exist, and just walking around saying it's all good. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that we need to be responsible and clear-minded, and we need to face the darkness. Joseph Campbell, who was if you haven't ever read any of his stuff, he's a very interesting person to read. He studied many mythologies and came up with universal themes that went through many mythologies. And probably one of the most well-known was the hero's journey. He talks about that journey that a hero makes. And one of the steps that the hero makes in his journey or her journey is meeting his dark side or her dark side, face to face. You see it in Star Wars when Luke Skywalker meets himself. Do you remember that scene? I don't remember which one it's in, but he meets himself. And I think that is also true. I didn't keep up with the Harry Potter, but I think doesn't Harry Potter meet himself? His dark side? I don't watch that much, so. Whereas actually he's fighting himself. And so that's the idea of meeting your dark side face to face. We don't want to run away from our fears. We don't want to fear our fears. We don't want to deny our angers. We do want to understand where the hatred comes in, where the anger comes in, where the fear comes from. And therefore, to invite your darkness in, have tea with it, laugh with it, dance with it, make love to it, wrestle with it, talk to it until you understand it so well that it is your ally. I believe that much of our own darkness comes from very basic emotions and thoughts of when we separated from light, we as beings, not human beings, but when we became entrapped in the physical, when we lost our connection to the source. I believe that is where we began to fear because we didn't know. We lost. It's like being helpless and hopeless. And sometimes you may feel helpless and hopeless. And there's a reason. At one point, I realized how much I was pretending and denying my own darkness. I was pretending it didn't exist, and I was like shoving it under the rug and, you know. And then I realized that I could look at that in two ways. I could look at it as a child that was sick. And I wouldn't kick a little child who's sick out the door. I would put it in bed, nurture it, give it medicine, do whatever I could to get it well. And then the other side was me just being bratty. You know, and I go, okay, so when I'm just being a brat, I have to say, get over yourself. So there are times when you have to say, get over yourself. When we take things personally, petty things that we take personally, things that don't amount to a hill of beans, when we turn them into a great big drama, that's the times when you can say, just get over yourself. Get over it. But there are other times when you want to bring that in, that pain, that suffering in, and look at it and deal with it and understand where it's coming from, because it's something that's more deep-rooted that you do need to understand. So I find that that's really important. So I think the pressure that we're experiencing, the intensity, is the death of the old ideas and the birth process of the new, some of which I don't think we really know what's coming. I think some of it we can and we can imagine, and others we have yet to imagine it. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to talk about some of the old paradigms that we're letting go, and these may not be, I doubt that these are all of them. You probably can think of some that I didn't think of, and if you want to talk about that later, that'd be great. And then I'm going to talk about the new paradigms that are coming in, and again, I'm sure there's some that you say, well, what about? Well, sure, I'm not going to be able to think of all those new paradigms that are coming in. But just remember that a paradigm is a belief that has been collectively agreed upon that we call reality. So some of this is everything is separate from and unrelated to everything else. That I'm separate from you, and that chair is separate from me, and the planet is separate from all the other planets of the universe, and everything's separate. That's one paradigm that we've all agreed on at a certain point. The materialism, that nothing is real unless you can experience it with your five senses. It has to be, you have to be able to touch it, like this is real, right? Because I can touch it. But whatever's in this room must not be real, even though there's all kinds of stuff going on in this room that we can't see. It's not real. Okay, so the only thing that's real is what I can experience with my five senses. And the cool thing is what I just heard Houston Smith say on that little YouTube. He said, we call this real, but scientists go and they say, well, it's mostly space. If you look at the atomic structure, molecular structure of these physical things, these solid objects, they're not solid at all. They're mostly space. And it looks like it's solid, not moving, but again, if you look deeper, it's a mass of movement. So those are two things that scientists are saying, no, that's not true about this. And then he went to say, and then we find out that the particles that make up these that they're not particles, that they are a particle and energy. Is that right? Particle and, somebody help me here. It's two different things that our minds have difficulty bringing together, that it's a wave and a particle. That's what it is, a wave and a particle. And how do you imagine a wave and a particle being together, being one? Can you imagine it? I haven't yet been able to imagine that. But he's saying that what science is finding is we as a species have not caught up to. That there's a lot of things that are being discovered. And then when you get down to quantum, that's the quantum. All the quantum stuff that's happening now, the quantum physics, that is so incredible, that is really telling us metaphysically what's happening, where metaphysics and quantum physics are coming together and aligning with each other, which I'm going to talk about in just a minute. So the materialism. And then identification with physical only. This is me, right? This is me. The physical body, conscious ego, and emotions. It's pretty much me. And if I have a spiritual experience or I think about God, God is somewhere separate. Even though if I say God is within, do I live that? Do I really? Do I feel it in every cell of my body? Or is it just an idea that sounds good that I'm saying? You know? We still think of things that are spiritual as separate from us. We even say, we are spiritual beings having a physical experience. And there's truth in that, but do you feel that every day? Do you feel like a spiritual being walking through life? Or are you still pretty much a physical being walking through life? And every once in a while you have this aha moment. So these old paradigms are hard to let go of 100% and embrace the new. We're living in a fixed world of limited resources, scarcity, and scarcity. So we're running out of fossil fuels. We're running out of food. Where our population is getting too big. We're running out of water. All these things that we're running out of, and it is a concern. I'm not saying that it's not. However, I'm going to bring a new point when we get to the new paradigm. But yeah, if we think of ourselves purely physical and we depend on physical, yeah, it is scarce. We will run out of food, we will run out of water, and we will run out of fossil fuels and everything else. If we continue to think that way, and that's why it's got to go. Otherwise, we will destroy ourselves. Our DNA is set and we can't change it. So whatever your DNA was when you were born, that's who you are and that's the way you're going to be. And that has changed as well. I'm going to read from Barbara Marx Hubbard. It's an article or a paper that she wrote called An Evolutionary Synthesis, A New World View. And these are some things that she wrote are some of the old paradigms that need to go. Global capitalism and unlimited economic growth will lead to a just economy and global health. That's what she says is the old paradigm that needs to go. And if we keep the global capitalism and we keep doing the unlimited economic growth, it's supposed to lead us to a just economy and global health. And we're finding that that's not the case. The buildup of military power for greater security at the expense of human and environmental needs. So we're finding that if we build our military up, and forget about humanitarian needs, forget about our environment, that's not working either. That's not working. The materialistic, accidental universe, mindless, purposeless, directionless, which is kind of what I talked about, is everything being separate. Just everything's kind of going in its own way without any purpose, without any function. And I know there was some, and I don't remember who said it, but it was a mechanistic kind of universe where the gods created the universe and then set it in motion like a machine. And so our universe operates like a clock. It operates like a machine. And again, that's an old paradigm that's going. So with these, and there's an inevitable progress through technology. If we keep building the technology, we're progressing. And is that really what's happening? Just because you get a new computer or a new cell phone that's got all these new things to it, yeah, technology is moving along, but are we progressing? Are we evolving? I don't think so. So these are some paradigms that we have accepted that we say, okay, these are true, and then we're questioning them now. We're going, I don't think so. I don't think so. So what's happening is there's a vacuum that's being created because people are going to saying, these ideas I don't think are true, but what am I going to put in their place? And there's part of where the confusion comes and the chaos and the insecurity, because we don't know what we're going to replace that with. We haven't thought about that. So I want to talk about the new paradigm that's coming into play. It's coming in. And actually the School of Metaphysics has been teaching it ever since it began. And it teaches it through the teachings as well as through the universal laws and through the essential life skills. Now, a universal law is a statement or something that is true for anyone, anytime, any place. So it's been true for thousands of years, and it continues to be true. It's a mental law. You're probably one of them that you're the most familiar with is the law of attraction, because it became really popularized a few years ago. That's a mental law that works anytime, anywhere, for anyone. So those are the universal laws. They're also from Hermes. If you're familiar with Hermes, he put together some laws, Hermetic laws, and we take some of our laws. We use some of the laws that he presented in the universal laws that we present in the school. And an essential life skill is basically a skill where you can live more efficiently and effectively. And I'll be outlining what those are as we go along. So our breakthrough is, if you think about it, we are living in the world that we have defined, and the world that we live in, and the world that we've all agreed is reality, is three-dimensional. And as we let go of these ideas, it could be that a new dimension will arise, and we will begin to live in a different dimension. That's what I'm saying about I have no idea where we're going, which I think is absolutely cool. So it's kind of like we're waking up from a very long sleep. We really are waking up. Spiritually, we're waking up. We're becoming much more aware. We're becoming aware of each other. We're becoming aware of people on the other side of the planet. You know, media has helped us to do that. That's the upside of media, I think. That we are becoming much more aware of each other and the well-being of each other. More acceptance of each other. And some of the things that are happening in our government right now, a lot of people are appalled by. And they're thinking, what's happening is almost like our government is destroying our country, our nation. Our nation is being destroyed because we work so hard to build these humanitarian things that help people, and they're being taken away. And that is of concern. So the first new paradigm, it's coming into being, is that we are spiritual beings. We're connected and related to our Creator. So the first one is, I'll just put in, and when I talk about this as a paradigm, I really do mean that it's going to get in your bones. It's going to be the way you move in the world. You know, we say that, don't we? I bet everybody in this room has said it at least once, maybe many, many times. We're spiritual beings. How much of that do you feel in your whole body and every fiber of your being? We're spiritual beings. This is the real self. Our spirit is our real self, and some people call it the authentic self, the cosmic. There's lots of names that this is given. It's our light, our essence, our true nature. And the universal laws that go with this, I think I'll use a different color. It is the complete law. And the complete law means, seek ye first the kingdom of heaven and everything else shall be given to you. It's like, seek your essence, seek the highest that you can, and everything will be given to you. And the law of existence and free will. So we were given, when we came into being, and I'm not talking about physically human, I'm talking about long before that. When we came in as I am, as intelligence, when we broke away from light, we were given two things. Our existence, which is I am creator. I am part of creation. And free will. And when you bring it all the way out into the physical, that means the ability to choose, to make choices. We are mentally encoded with a mental DNA to fulfill ourselves as creators. We don't have a choice here. You're always creating because you're always thinking. And creation occurs with thought. So you don't have a choice. You're not going to wake up one morning and say, I don't think I'll create today. I don't think I'll think today. Doesn't work. You're always creating. And so what you create, you get to experience. And then you get to learn how to be a better creator. And so that's part of our, we're encoded with it. We're compelled to create. We're compelled to fulfill that potential, because that is what it is, that potential. Hopefully this color will be good. And the essential life skills that go along with this are, can you see this? Self-respect and breath. Now, self-respect doesn't mean just self-esteem. It means taking a good look at self. And so self-respect means I see myself as light, as a light being, as a spiritual being. And the reason I put breath on there is because breath ties the body to the soul. Breath comes from the word spirare, which is a Latin word, spirare, which also comes from spirit. So at one time, spirit and breath were synonymous. They're not so synonymous anymore. But breath is tied to the soul. And many, many practices, yogic practices where you watch your breath, Buddhist practices as well, where you're watching your breath. There's a reason for that. And when you find the breath within the breath, you have found the spirit. You have come into contact with the spirit. Okay, so that's the first one, the first new paradigm. Number 2 is our universe is connected through energetic intelligence in a web of consciousness. So the universe is interconnected. Have you ever watched a spider web? And when an insect gets into the web, what happens? What happens to the web? The whole thing vibrates, right? Like this. It doesn't go like this, like a wave in water. It actually vibrates like that. That's why it's called web of consciousness. So your thought, it's like that insect going into the spider web that vibrates the entire web of consciousness. So there was a practice, there was a conference that the School of Metaphysics presented, and there was one of the practices of everybody getting in a circle and stringing string. Some of you probably have experienced this. Stringing a string back and forth throughout the whole group, making a web. Making sure that it's all touching, and then everybody plucking that string and watching what happens, and watching the whole thing vibrate. So each person had a personal experience with that. And one time when I've gone through this several times, but one time I went through it and I went, how do I want my string to vibrate? how do I want my string to affect the web of consciousness? And so from that point forward, became much more mindful and conscious of my thoughts, my choices, my actions. And I wanted to, I didn't see it as a burden, and I didn't see it as like too much for me. I can't handle this. I must be, I have this terrible thought. I don't want to, I don't want you to go there with that, because it's not worth it. But to become more mindful of the choices that you make, the way that you think. Again, like I'm saying, when you've got a thought that's not positive, look at it carefully and see what is it? Is it just me being like a little brat, or is it me really hurting and in pain and I need to take care of myself? What do I need to do? And at that point, and it was not a difficulty for me. I wanted my string to vibrate as high as I was able to, as highly as I was able to. And I made conscious effort to make sure that the choices that I made did that. And we know that the choices that we make when we when we use plastic and we use it and just toss it in the trash. I see plastic bags floating around in the wind, in the streets, and even those kind of things make a difference. Those kind of things. So, the law that goes with that is the law of relativity. Which does talk about the connection. We're all in this together. And so that means if somebody has an aha moment, has a breakthrough, everybody benefits. And when you have a breakthrough, everybody benefits. And when somebody else has a breakthrough, you benefit. So we all benefit each other in that. We're all in this together. We really are one organism, and I'll talk about that more a little bit later. And the essential life skills that go with this are undivided attention and concentration. Because it requires your attention and your concentration to know how you relate to the world, what your relationship is to the world. It requires that. The media is a nervous system, like our nervous system, and the mass media, I don't know how many of you even watch TV and watch the news. Most people who are trying to transcend and transform just have gone, I don't even want to hear it anymore. However, we have the social media, and in a lot of ways, sometimes that can be pretty bad, but it can also be very good. And I'm on a lot of emails where they send and say, where the petitions that are being done that are making a difference, where you can just put, click your name in there, and they get so many names, and they send that to someone that they're wanting to make a statement to, and it has made a difference. So there's lots of good things that are occurring like that. The heart math people, if you've ever heard of them, they do a lot of full moon meditations where they do the heart resonance and they send that heart energy out to the world. Lynn McTaggart is another one, and she has written a book called The Bond, which talks about the fact that we are not competitive. By our nature, we are not competitive. We are really cooperative. We are geared. We are are designed to cooperate with each other, not to compete. And James Twyman is another one who does these like prayers and things on a mass scale. By the way, Lynn McTaggart is doing an experiment starting tomorrow through, I think, this next week. And she does these experiments. They're called intention experiments, where she brings people from all over the world. They have a thought for a concentrated period of time that goes, and then they see what kind of results. James Twyman's done the same thing. And it's about peace in the United States. Is what it is. So starts tomorrow. So there's a lot of good things like that going on. A lot of things happening. Okay, the next one. We are entering the first age of conscious evolution. The evolution of evolution, from unconscious to conscious choice. So up to really very recently, we thought evolution just happened naturally. It was a natural occurrence. Recently, we have realized and discovered that we can consciously cause evolution to occur. So there's this shift that's going on. So it's evolution of evolution. The evolution of evolution. Oh, wrong color. And the law that goes with this is, of course, the law of evolution. And the law of believing and knowing. Believing and knowing is you begin with an idea, it makes sense to you. It's a belief because you don't yet have the personal experience. Once you have the personal experience with it, you know. So you can believe that you can swim a lap in 2 minutes, 1 minute, 5 minutes. But you don't really know that you can do it until you actually get into the water and you do it. So that's the difference between believing and knowing. So belief is the idea, and knowing is putting that idea into a personal experience or practicing with it. And that is how we evolve. We take a belief and we work with it until we know it. There is a professor, Eric Chasen, and he talks about becoming more conscious of our evolution, and he is a proponent of ethical evolution, of ethical wisdom in our evolution. It reminds me of the indigenous idea of thinking 7 generations into the future. You know, it's that kind of idea where it's ethical. The choices that you make and the things that you do are ethical. And I think in the school we teach about doing what we do for the goodness of all concerned. So it's the same idea. They have that ethics in it because we want everyone to be a winner, including ourselves. Everyone to benefit with the choices that we make. And the life skills that go with that. Memory and imagination. Memory, because we need to know where we've come from, and imagination helps us to know where we want to go. And so as we evolve, we want to take what's worked in the past and apply it to what we can imagine can be better in the future. The next paradigm. We were talking about that if you can experience it with your five senses, it's real. So thought really doesn't have any effect on anything. It's the old paradigm. And the new paradigm is that actually reality begins with thought. Reality is found in thought. Now this has been coming about, this idea, and the universal law that it corresponds to. You'll see what I'm talking about when I put the universal law down. Is the law of attraction, and the law of cause and effect. Now, there have been a lot of people who have been professing this in the last century, but I believe it hit its tipping point. You know what a tipping point is, where its critical mass and everything shifts. I believe when The Secret came out, the movie The Secret, that this idea hit its critical point. It means it goes everywhere at that point. The thing about The Secret is that it's pretty elementary, and it teaches that if you have good thoughts, good things will happen to you. If you have bad thoughts, bad things will happen to you. And that is a very elementary preschool concept of the law of attraction and the law of cause and effect. It at least got it in people's minds that it was possible, that thoughts really could make a difference. The way I think could make a difference. However, it was misleading. And people thinking, well, if these bad things are happening to me, then what did I do wrong? Or what bad thought did I have? Or why am I a bad person? And that's not the law of attraction. It's not the law of cause and effect. My teacher, one of my teachers, who was instrumental in getting the School of Metaphysics going, Dr. Jerry Rothermel, he talked a lot about the law of attraction being like corresponding needs. So I have a need to give here, and I have a need for what you're giving, and so they come together. That's one way he talked about the law of attraction, that our needs, because we both have a need and they correspond with each other, they can come together. And I like that. That makes a lot more sense. And there's different ways that we attract. It's not just conscious mind. It can be subconscious mind too, which means if you have something from a past life that you're trying to understand this life, you're going to bring those situations into your life. And it has nothing to do with you having bad thoughts in this life or good thoughts in this life. It's all about you progressing and evolving your consciousness. And so you do draw things to you so that you can bring out the best in you. The way that I like to look at this is, if something is in my life, I look and I say, what is this situation asking of me? How can I respond to it with my best self? How can my best self respond to this? Because if you're responding and you're acting from the highest part of you that you can imagine and you can operate from, then you're going to evolve. You're going to progress. You're going to learn. And then there's no blame game and fault finding at all. You're just saying, this situation is calling forth something from within me, and I'm going to use whatever it's calling. There's some other really cool things going on in this field, in this idea of thought and matter. Have you heard of epigenetics? Epigenetics, I think, was made popular by a man by the name of Bruce Lipton. And what he's talking about is that our DNA, like I talked earlier, the old paradigm is that your DNA is fixed when you're born and doesn't ever change. That's just the way you're going to be. Just get used to it. Well, the scientists have found that that is not the case at all. That your DNA changes. That there are some genes that turn off and some genes that turn on. And it is all dependent upon, I believe it's dependent on many things, but one of the things it is dependent on is your thinking, the way that you think. That's why I'm also saying, try to raise your thoughts, because it's affecting you. It's affecting your DNA. Did you see What the Bleep? The movie What the Bleep? That was another really good movie. And you remember when Marlee Matlin, I don't know what she was called in the movie, but she looked at herself and said, I hate myself, I hate myself, I hate myself. And she started seeing her face get old, and then she realized, that her thoughts were affecting her, that she could see it in the mirror, and that was a shift for her. Same idea. Another person that was in that movie who I really love because of the things that she has discovered, and her name is Candace Pert. I don't know if you've heard of her. She did a lot of research into neuroscience, and what she found is that when you have a thought, that there is simultaneously in every cell of your body a neuropeptide that is created, that is formed. So if you think, I hate myself, okay? Every cell in your body now vibrates. There's a chemical that's been produced in every cell that corresponds to that. So if you say, I love myself, then every cell of your body is producing a peptide, a neuropeptide that's producing that. And she was in What the Bleep as well, and she talked about, I don't know if you remember these little blurbs walking around at the wedding reception. That was her talking. She said, we get addicted. We get addicted to those thoughts because they feel comfortable, even though we don't like it. And I would say the thought that I finally came down to, because I was working with it, and I got lower and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, and I finally got to poor me. And I realized that was my thing that turned my neuropeptides on. And I was unconscious. I was unconscious of it. So there's another thing about the thought and the cause and effect. The thought. How thoughts affect us physically, and because we're connected, how thoughts can affect each other and the world around us. And what goes with that is reasoning. When you are reasoning, you are endeavoring to understand truth. You're trying to get to a better mousetrap, so to speak. You're trying to devise something that's better. It adds to greater truth. Okay. The next one is the law is abundance. The universe is abundant. There's a gentleman by the name of Mark Cummings who wrote about this, and he writes about 0-point energy. And he says, the fact is that by many estimates, there abides in 1 cubic centimeter of empty space an amount of energy greater than the total amount of energy contained or expressed in all the matter of the known universe. This energy is called 0-point energy because it was discovered that even at or around absolute zero, which is by definition the temperature where all thermal motion is supposed to cease, there was still this irreducible motion, which was clearly non-thermal in nature. We are immersed in a field of infinite energy density in the guise of what appears to be empty space. Space is a highly potentiated energetic medium, shining with vast luminous force and shimmering with intrinsic sentience. Solid footing to fundamentally based, abundance-based worldview, which is a much-needed antidote to the scourge of nihilistic materialism. So, we are in a sea of abundance, which means that there is energy all around us. There is potential. The problem right now is we don't know how to get to it. We don't know how to tap into it. And it's kind of like the natives who didn't see the ship because they never didn't know what it was, or didn't, we don't believe it because we have that old paradigm that you've got to be able to touch it, feel it. So we think, there's nothing out here. There's nothing. When there's an incredible amount of energy that if we tap into, what could we do? Maybe we can fuel. We don't have to depend on fossil fuels anymore. We can depend on that. And I think Nikola Tesla was one of the people who was way ahead of his time, and he could get electricity out of thin air. Thin air. He somehow understood that and could draw it. He knew how to do it. So it's the law of abundance is the law that goes with it, which does state that we live in an abundant universe. And the mind skill that goes with that is intuition. So as we tap into the unlimited resources of our subconscious mind, we have infinite, we have abundance. So intuition is that tapping into the truth, tapping into the subconscious mind. Okay, one more. You guys, everybody take a deep breath. I can tell that I'm talking too much, I think. Okay, the next one, the last one, is the universe is alive. The universe is a self-aware organism. It's not a machine. It's not just out there disconnected from everything else. It is an intelligence of its own. The earth is a living organism. I mean, we've started hearing more and more about Gaia as that intelligent being that is the earth. So that, it's coming into being. It's coming into being. The earth, or the universe, is evolving. The universe is expanding. And I was listening to Brian Swim. He's another one of my favorite, he's a cosmologist. And I was listening to one of his tapes yesterday when I drove down, and he said, the earth is expanding. And so really, you feel like you're at the center of the universe because everything is expanding away from you. He said it's kind of like this. If we were to make some bread, and we were to put raisins in the bread, and you were one of those raisins, and you put it in the oven, and you're one of those raisins watching, and you're watching all the other raisins, and as the bread rises, all the raisins are moving away from you. So it looks like you're the one at the center of the universe, and everything is moving away from you. And he said, how many centers of universe do you think there are? Infinite, right? But it's an expanding universe. It's an evolving universe. This is another new idea that I'm wrapping my mind around right now. That Pam doesn't evolve. Pam doesn't evolve. Pam doesn't evolve separate from everybody else. It's not a big contest to who's going to get to enlightenment first. It's not a big competition. But the universe is evolving. And part of that evolution is I am a vehicle for which evolution can occur. And just like I said earlier, when I evolve, everything evolves. I'm part of that. And when some other area of the universe evolves, I benefit and I evolve. So it's this huge organism. It's kind of like a body in some ways, because we hold in our DNA all the earlier life forms, and probably what's to come as well. So the universal law that goes with this is the law of infinity. And the mind skill is entrainment. Now I have just a little bit more to go, and we'll be done. So what do you need? Here's one idea. Dr. Barber calls this the three crown jewels. So we have the triangle pointing up, the triangle pointing down, and the point in the center. So the triangle pointing up is meditation. The triangle pointing down is visualization. Thought coming into matter. And the point is concentration. This is what you need. Because if you can connect, and however you want to describe it, connect with God, high self, universe, source, it doesn't matter what word you use. You have an image, whatever your image is. That's the highest thought you can imagine. You can connect with that. And you can bring those high thoughts down. Visualization is not just the use of imagination. It is a scientific method of how the conscious and subconscious minds work together to bring thought into matter. And then concentration, being able to hold your mind still on what you want. This is what you need. This is how you will benefit yourself and everything else. And I also think that it's so important to be in a group, to be connected in a group. Because we slip. Jamie and I were talking about this last night. We slip. We start thinking that old paradigm, and if there's somebody around to hear us and go, oh, wait a minute. Did you hear what you just said? And you go, oh, yeah. So if you have a group with you, if you have a community that supports you, of like-minded people, then it's easier. It's a lot easier. You grow together. It makes a big difference. I want you to try to wrap your mind around this, because I haven't wrapped my mind around this quite yet. It's pretty cool, though. Peter Russell has hypothesized that it takes approximately 10 billion atoms to make a cell, and 10 billion cells to make a brain. We are approaching 10 billion people on Earth. He hypothesized in White Hole in Time that as we approach this number of brains and neurons on the planet, and when we reach a state of mass resonance of coherence of brainwave patterns of critical mass, that we may be ready for shared experiences of other dimensions of reality. He assumes it will be an intelligent light, a white light explosion, rather than a nuclear holocaust, an explosion of spiritual awakening. And that does mean that the brain waves need to be coherent. So the more that our brain waves are of that high nature, we are coherent with that. And then in summary, I want to read what Barbara Marx Hubbard wrote. This is to summarize what I've been saying. From the point of view of this evolutionary synthesis, the meaning of our new power is that we are becoming a self-evolving universal species. Our advanced technologies, along with our deepening compassion and expanded consciousness, offers us the possibility of an ever-evolving future. We are coded with the process of creation, internalized as our own desire to create and prosper. We have the real possibility of gaining co-intelligence to guide us through this crisis of our birth to the next stage of our evolution. So, if you have any questions or comments, response, I will open it up. Yes, Robert.
Earlier, you talked that we were coming on that age where it's very critical because there's so many things happening in the world. What about other times in our past, like around War I was involved because there was a lot of changes then.
Mm-hmm. There were.
World War II, too. So how is this one different than those two? Is it just a continuation of this change? Or?
No, well, maybe to some extent, especially Nazism, which was a very nationalistic, totalitarian type of government that was trying to take over the world. And I think that in the United States right now, that our president is encouraging a kind of nationalism. So in that way, there is a kind of parallel. And Hitler did focus on a particular race of people that were the problem, that need to be annihilated, and focused upon the fact that it was the Aryan race that was superior. And so, white supremacy is bringing its head up again, neo-Nazism is coming up again, these kinds of things are coming up again. I believe that what happened in Germany, though, was the people were devastated from World War I. And Hitler began to bring the economy back. So people believed in him and followed him. That's not the case with Trump. A lot of people do not agree with him and feel like he is destroying rather than helping. So there is that. There's a different kind of consciousness that's here. And I think there is, to some extent, the memory that we don't want this to happen again in our country. And also people are standing up. There's the resist movement, and there's a lot of movements that are saying no. And that's another thing I think, that's part of the countenance, is if you know that if something that's in the world that you hear about that you think is not good, even just saying, I disagree with that, that's not in the best interest of the people. That's dangerous. Even just making that statement is adding to. You see what I mean? You don't have to go out and protest. I'm not saying do or don't protest. However, just making that statement, I think adds to. So I think that maybe some of the things are rearing their head that are resonating with that. We've got Korea. There could be another. Who knows if there's going to be another world war? It's going to be different this time because it's going to be all nuclear. There's not going to be many on the ground combat, I don't believe. I think it's going to be all missiles and things like that. So that's going to be a different kind of war that we have. I think I just believe, I was born right after the war, so I don't know what people thought, but I can imagine that they were just, especially in Europe, they were sick. They're sick of war, sick of death, sick of blood and gore and everything. And I think that was one of the reasons that the hippie movement rose. I believe it was some of those souls that had lived in Europe that were born in the United States right after it and said, no more war, love and peace, love and peace, and that kind of thing. That's why I think that movement came as an evolutionary movement, because it was like, no, never again. Let's never do this again. So It's a good question. It's a really good question. And, you know, I don't know that I have all the answers. It really just depends on what the people do and how they're willing to stand up and not allow certain things to occur on many levels. You know, most of the time when there's been social change, it's been grassroots. It's been done. Oh, that was another thing I wanted to say, was that there's a lot of organizations right now, all under the radar. You don't hear about them, but they're doing all kinds of good things. You know, sustainability and just all kinds of stuff is happening. So there is, it's kind of like this intensity of the old and the new coming up and probably getting closer and closer, that there'll be maybe another Big Bang. I'm thinking about the Big Bang, and maybe there's this Big Bang, which takes us into this whole other dimension, maybe. I don't know. It's fun to think about anyway. I think about Big Bang, and recently I thought about Big Bang, and I thought, you know, when you have these good thoughts, your brain fires. You know, you've got all this firing going on in your brain, your synapses of your neurons of your brain. So maybe that's kind of like a little baby Big Bangs in your head. You know, maybe there's Big Bangs going on all the time, but it's not quite what we when we think of the Big Bang as the beginning of our universe. But maybe we're doing Big Bangs all the time. Well, I hope I stimulated you into ideas that you haven't considered before. I think we're really in very, very exciting times. And when it started with this article that I read by Barbara Marx Hubbard, because she really laid it out. And it set my mind. I wanted to know the deeper. I knew there was something deeper going on, and I just, you know, I heard little bits and pieces. And when I read what she wrote, it's like, yes, this is what's going on. And it kind of settled my mind. So I hope at least settled your mind down to where something good is coming from this, really. But I need to do this together. It's not dependent on one person. Everybody needs to do it. Because it's going to hit a tipping point. And you know, a tipping point means it reaches a critical mass, and then everything turns. It goes everywhere. So just hold that in your mind and know that you're adding to it. Every time you say, I don't agree with that, that's wrong, it's cruel. And every time you have compassion.
This is William, hopefully your favorite videographer from Two Hats Publishing. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like it, please leave comments below, or like, follow, or subscribe to us and get notices of all our videos. We love it, even when you call.